Okay, so we're recording. So my name is Mark Fowler. Today is Monday, May 25th, 2020, and I'll be interviewing my parents, Jan Fowler and Brian Fowler. Right now, we are in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, so everyone is pretty much stuck at home. So we thought it would be a good time to do this. And actually, Dad, okay, so Mom, why don't we start with you? And why don't you introduce yourself, so your full name, and tell us a little about, where you were born, maybe how old you are today, and where you're actually at today.
Okay, my full name is Janet Lee Fowler. I was born November 11th, 1956, which is Veterans Day. I am 63 and currently living in Kansas City, Missouri, and have been since 1980.
Great. And why don't you talk about where you're from and where you grew up, and introduce your parents a little bit.
Okay, my parents are Harold and Mona Selby. They were both living, one in New Hampton, Missouri. My dad was living in Bethany, went to the war, came back, they met. They briefly moved to Kansas City to work here with the Social Security Administration, and then ended up moving back to Bethany where they lived forever. My dad died at the age of 52 in 1977, and my mom is still living and is 96 years old and currently living in skilled nursing care.
Great. So you grew up in Bethany and you were there till okay, so after a brief pause, Mom, why don't you tell us about your siblings? Who were they, and can you give their full names?
I have three siblings. Fred was born in 1947. Mary Victoria, that goes by Vicky, was born in 1950. Ken was born in 1953, and I was born in 1956.
And where are they all living now?
Fred lives in Virginia. Vicky lives in Kansas City, about a quarter of a mile from myself. Ken lives in Virginia. And we see each other not regularly, but I see Fred and Rhonda fairly frequently, and Ken at least once or twice a year.
Mm-hmm. And Vicky every day?
Vicky every day, and talk to her 3 times.
Okay. And then, so going back to your parents, can you talk a little about what they were like?
They were very small town people. My mom is one of 10 kids. She was next to the youngest. My dad was one of 3, and he was the oldest. They had Mom grew up, they went through the Depression, started carrying papers when she and her sister, when they were 7-year-olds, and would be out in the dark in New Hampton, Missouri, carrying papers, getting cold, getting rain, getting scared. But I think they desperately needed money because a lot of the older kids were gone. Her dad had a chicken feeding business or something. I think that's kind of what it was. My dad's mom died in childbirth with their 4th child. His dad was already, when he was born, 40, which for that time period was really old. So his mom died. They had 3 kids in 3 years because they had twins, and they went to live with his grandmother, who was very, very Republican, very strict, and kids were to be seen and not heard. So they weren't allowed at meals to talk. And it was just a very different lifestyle for my 2 parents. So they both went through high school and then met when he came back from the war. Her mom died also when she was 19. She had graduated from New Hampton, went to Washington, D.C. and worked for the FBI for a year, and then had to come back and take care of her mom. So they did not have easy lives, either of them. They were both, it's interesting now reading back and seeing what they did go through.
So then they moved back to Bethany and started their family. And then can you talk about what it was like growing up in Bethany, and what was your house like? What was your neighborhood like? What was the town like?
Bethany is small town. I don't think it ever got over 3,000 people. We lived in a house on Main Street until I was about 9, and then they built a house that they were so proud of, and I think at the time it was a $25,000 house. And looking back, it does look a little bit like a trailer that's not on wheels, but they were really proud. And to think that 6 people lived in it, it's kind of unbelievable because it is small compared to today's standards. And it was kind of a lot of it an idyllic small town. You could truly go anywhere, and you had no cell phones, so they have no clue where you were, but it didn't really, they knew you were somewhere with someone. So it wasn't, you rode a bike a lot, you walked downtown, you babysat, just like what you would think a small town was in the 50s and 60s.
Do you remember the address?
This last one was 2204 Woodruff Avenue.
In Bethany.
Yeah.
And then how about your aunts and uncles? What do you remember about them, or do you have a favorite or anyone you were particularly close to?
Definitely did. On my dad's side, he had twin siblings, and Herb we saw like occasionally. He was a nice guy. Their family's nice. Hulda, his sister, his twin, was special needs. They think born maybe with lack of oxygen. I don't think they were sure, but it was a tough thing because my mom and dad ended up helping her a lot, just like with life's challenges. And it ended up because my dad was in the reserve, he would be gone every summer, and we had a farm. So my mom would have to take care of the farm as well as Paul. And she was like kind of like having a 5th kid, because she would pick at you because she was developmentally maybe like a 7-year-old. She would just pick fights. So it was but she came over a lot. My mom's siblings were spread all over. Not only one lived close by, Katie. So love Katie Gardner. She was the best woman, great cook. So yeah, that would be the one I was certainly the closest to. But then her other one, I mean, we saw all of her siblings. So yeah, I did know them. I know my first cousins, and can't really think how many I have right now. But yeah, I mean, we weren't like see each other for every holiday, but definitely we spent all the time with Katie and Gardner.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that would be, she was a fave.
And then how about, I guess, any like family routines or trips that stand out?
Well, they were always car trips. I didn't fly until I was in dental hygiene school. We would drive to Colorado, Arkansas. There weren't big family trips for us. You had 4 people in the back of a car, actually 5, because we would take Katie a lot because Gardner didn't like to travel. So we would take her, but no, I mean, they always tried to do stuff with us, and it was good. I mean, my dad at the time was probably making $12,000 a year, which wasn't bad money. He was a highway department worker. It wasn't bad money, but it wasn't going to lend itself to a lot of vacations.
So he did that, and your mom worked with the paper, or she wasn't doing that yet?
She stayed home until I was a sophomore in high school, and then went back, did welcome wagon, where she greeted new people into this town. And then she was a retail clerk just to get out of the house. And then she and my dad bought into the Harrison County Advisor business. And then when my dad died, she bought it out and has owned it ever since. So since 1977.
Which is an advertising newspaper?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
In a small town.
So, and then I guess more shifting from your parents to you too, what are some of your, I guess, best memories from growing up?
That you really could do anything. I mean, you would just roam a lot. And my summer probably from the time, gosh, I was little. From the time I was little, it was pretty much every day. I spent all day, every day at the pool in the summer. And it was because Fred would be the manager a couple of the years because he was enough older. So she would drop us off there, and it was kind of, no, don't really call me. Come and pick you up. I don't care. Here's enough money to buy a candy bar while you're here. But it was fun. That's where your friends were. I did the church youth group, the Methodist church, which is where we went. Did that, and just also I was the last kid, so they weren't very strict at that time, so I could really go do a lot of stuff I probably shouldn't have done. But it was fun. I mean, I didn't end up in jail. That was a good thing. But you would go to Iowa when you were early teens, mid-teens, and drink way before you should. You would,
because their drinking age was 18 versus Missouri's, which was 21.
Right, and it was like 12 miles, so you would drive there, which wasn't the best decision. You could go skinny dip in the lake, and that was fun. We played golf, but anything you did, it was so small that you knew Mona would know about it before you ever got home, and it was true. We also had a drive-in. We did that a lot, and you'd put people in the trunk because you could get a lot of people on Buck Night. It was fun. There is a lot more probably alcohol use at a younger age in a small town because there really wasn't a lot of activity, organized activity.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then that ties into, what was your worst memory from growing up?
Getting caught for a lot of things because they had Fred as the starter child, and he followed the book, the rule completely. Fred would never have done stuff. And then the next three, it was always like getting caught. Well, coming home after drinking and then getting sick was the biggest trouble I got into.
Yeah. How about, so you mentioned, liking the pool and some things like that. Did you like school growing up? Did you have a job growing up? And who were some of your good friends?
I did like school. And in a small town, you would walk to school, but also you could be involved in a gazillion different things. I played golf in high school. You do all the clubs and all. We started detasseling corn when I was like 13 or 14, and you would go out into fields. It was a short run, like 3 summers a week, but for that time, you made really good money, and it was the hardest job I've ever had. But Mom's very encouraging to go on.
So what would you actually do during it?
They put everybody in a truck, you ride to cornfields, and it's when the corn was pollinating male and female corn. So you would go down corn rows that probably were quarter to a half a mile long, and your job in these things that were probably at least 6 feet tall, and you stick your thumb in and you pull out the tassel on the top, and you're like there early morning until like mid-afternoon, and it just shreds your finger. You just cut it. But I mean, all your friends were doing it, so it was just what you did, and it was fast money, and that's what you had. Then we had Jane and I, my twin, we had a crew that we ran, and you used detasseling machines. And then there was your malt village work.
What's Malt Village?
31 flavors of malts and shakes. Oh. You worked there. Yeah.
Yep.
So that was the kind of job you did. And then after school was good, I then went to MU. And once I went to MU, I only came home one summer after that. And
University of Missouri. So you went there.
I did. I came home that summer, worked in a dental office, and thought, hey, maybe I'll do something in that. So I went to MU for 3 years with a biology major, and said, I don't have a clue what I'm going to do with this. So after that, I just decided, okay, I'll do dental hygiene school. and went to Johnson County,
Kansas.
Kansas, community college, got an associate and did dental hygiene. I didn't ever want to teach, so getting a bachelor's in it I didn't want to research or teach. But that was a great career for me. It lasted until I was 60.
And
So
what did you like and dislike about the work?
I love meeting, because of growing up in Bethany, I love being able to meet so many different people, and everybody has a story, like first impressions that you get of a patient. It's really, that's not who they are so often. You've established in your mind, and it's just so interesting talking to that many different people. My thought at the time was you probably could put a monkey on a stool and do the job, but I really did like the talking to people. Obviously, now that career has changed. You've done a 180 and it's totally different, but it was a great job for me. I could do part-time, be home part-time.
And anything you disliked?
Dentists can kind of be a shady group occasionally. They seem to have certain personality quirks throughout that field, but no, for the most part, it was good.
So then you started working in Kansas City doing that, and then can you talk about how you and Dad met?
We met through my sister, through Vicky. He had introduced her because he worked with her at the Court of Appeals. He met, and he had known Greg growing up, so he introduced Vicky and Greg, who later married. And then I met Brian at the pub crawl they had right before their wedding, and the rest is history.
So you guys met, and then how long did you date before he proposed and you guys got married?
We dated 6 months, and then he proposed, and we were married like 6 months after that. Yeah, because we got engaged on Easter. And then we got married in October 11th, had the first child July 22nd, which was Leah. We had Mark 10 3/4 months after that. And 2.5 years after that, we had Brad.
And what do you remember, I guess, about your wedding, looking back? Or what stands out from the day?
Really bad makeup. It looked like Morticia, as my siblings so fondly told me. It was a lot of work at the time, and that wasn't really the time that, at least for my mom, she wasn't going to be paying. So, well, really, it was Brian's money paid, and it was a stretch to have it, but we ran out of food. But it was fun. I mean, we had a good time, and yeah, I would do it again in a different fashion.
So you talked about your mom too, and so your dad obviously wasn't there. And you mentioned earlier he'd passed away. Can you talk about that too?
He had, and we don't know. I mean, he seemed healthy. He also was a smoker, like most of his adult life, like a lot of people of that generation. And he had the first stroke when I was 19, and I was at MU my first semester. Seemed like he recovered fairly well from that. He did have some like math issues, being able to do like certain in his head, math problems or some reasoning, but really okay. And then he, when I was home Christmas of my sophomore year of college, we watched as he had another stroke, and getting treatment in Bethany was lacking, to say the least. And then they called that next morning and said he had a massive stroke that night, and he wasn't speaking or really recognizing. So we brought him to Kansas City while ambulance, my mom and I followed, and then he lived like 3 weeks after that. Longest drive ever. And
then you had to go back to school right after?
It was kind of early in the break, so I stayed with Mom and we tried to like figure things out. And she wasn't like the crying, nervous type. I mean, she knew she could do it. She ended up having the day of the funeral. Her business partner tried to buy her out, so we went through that. But she persevered and won that battle. And then, yeah, so from that time on, like every holiday, every Mother's Day, Vicki and I would spend with Mom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because for a widowed 52-year-old in Bethany, Missouri, there wasn't a lot going on for her.
Mm-hmm.
But she, yeah, she was a hearty soul. It was her one true love, and she never wanted to marry after that.
Mm-hmm. So she didn't really date or anything after that, did she?
I think she had like 2 dates, but once again, the pool is not too many fish swimming in there. So, and she just said that she had what she wanted the first time and didn't ever do it. But guys, you look back now and think 52 is so young.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you kind of felt like you became a co-parent with her, because it's like, well, you're no longer a dumb 20-year-old. Now you're helping her make decisions.
And what do you remember about your dad personality-wise?
He was really funny, very soft-spoken. Rarely would you ever, he was not the disciplinarian. He could say he was disappointed and you felt horrible, whereas she would like give you a couple of slaps and she was much louder, and you just would get bitter. And with him, you just wanted to melt when you disappointed him. He was really funny, could make anyone laugh, really kind, just a good guy. I mean, especially from the way he grew up, he was good. He was a fiddler around the house. He, very organized. Everything had its place. Yeah, he was a good guy.
And Mona was the strict enforcer?
She was the enforcer, and being the end of 10 kids, I think you didn't really know what your place was. So she just, all she knew was work growing up. So yeah, she wasn't one that was going to cave on any issue you had.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, what else? So maybe shifting gears. What would you say is one of the happiest memories you have?
Probably growing up in Bethany. I mean, not just a specific, but just because it was you didn't really have many responsibilities. You didn't have anything to really distract you. We had a TV, but I didn't get a colored one until I was a junior in high school. So it wasn't like we didn't have a washer and dryer. We had a wringer washer. So you weren't hanging out at home doing screen time or anything. But yeah, it was probably just in general growing up there.
And how about one of the most difficult memories?
My dad dying.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any friends that had that.
Mm-hmm. How about, is there anything you regret looking back, either growing up or otherwise?
Probably that I didn't take high school a little more seriously. I could have probably worked a little harder at that, but it seemed easy enough, so I wasn't too worried about it. No, honestly, I mean, yeah, I did some really stupid, ill-advised things, but I don't regret them. I mean, that kind of makes who you are.
How about, let's see, can you tell us about someone you'll always remember?
It would be Katie and my dad.
Yeah.
They had the biggest especially Katie. Just, she was so kind and just a sweetheart, and would check on my mom every day. So she was also the one that died of breast cancer.
She did?
Yeah. So that was my maternal, when I was diagnosed, they'd always told me that wasn't a connection, but then yes, it is a connection.
Well, that's actually a good segue too. One of the questions I had was to talk about health history in the family, and if there's anything genetic we're predisposed to almost. Can you talk about, so your dad had a stroke,
Katie did have a stroke.
Katie had breast cancer, and you had breast cancer. Are there other common traits in the family on your side?
No, I don't really, My mom died young of some type of cancer, which they can't,
Your grandma, you mean?
my grandma, they can't really decide. Mom thought it was lower back. Her sister Francie thought it was like a uterine. So that could have been part of the link also with Katie, my grandma, and mine, my cousins. They don't know that, but mom's family was healthy until old age. And then they developed like diabetes. I think her dad did. My dad's side, he had arteriosclerosis, which is hardening of the arteries, which was his, and then the 2 strokes. His brother, so he died at 52. His brother Herb died, excuse me, like at 60 of brain cancer. And Hall died early 60s from a fall out of bed in the nursing care she was in. We're not sure. I don't think that was probably something legit, but yeah, so his family, nobody lived into old age at all, like mid 60. Yeah. But my mom's family lives long.
Her sister
Francie's
Francie is
98.
98.
Yeah, and their dad, her mom died young, but her dad didn't die. He died at an older age, and her siblings, nobody died. Really, 80 was the youngest.
And Mona's 94?
6.
96.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What would you say you feel most grateful for in life?
My parents. I mean, they were very, as I would tell my mom, through everything. I mean, you were the richest, the smartest, but it's a very good average, you might not shine the most, but it was they did a really good job.
How would you say your life's been different than what you imagined?
I don't think it really has. I mean, this is I guess it's kind of what you hope for. I had 3 great kids, great husbands. So yeah, I don't think it really has been much different than what I would have thought.
What else?
I did grow up though with a dad who was very Republican and a mom who was very Democrat, and they never never had similar opinions on anything, but they never argued about it either. It was just a non-starter topic. You didn't really discuss that at home.
Including your mom having Truman come stay at her house growing up too, didn't she?
Correct. Because he knew her dad. And I can't remember the connection, but yeah. But I think neither one of them, I mean, she wouldn't have been a Republican for anything, but she didn't care if he was.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad was a Republican appointed judge in Bethany, Missouri. So you couldn't get much stricter than that. So, yeah.
What else? I think those were my main ones. What else? I guess maybe are there any other memories that jump out at you from growing up or I guess family stories that are some that you hang on to?
Just Fred was, we always laughed because he was the golden child. He did everything you were supposed to do and didn't have any trouble telling, especially Vicki and Ken, what they were doing wrong. He was very, everything you would want in a firstborn. He hit perfection right on the head, went to MU, was the head of the ROTC program there, then was a lifer in the military until a few situations there. But I mean, he had a great career. He just did everything the way you were supposed to. Vicki did everything you weren't supposed to because Fred was the leader and she wasn't going to be having any of it. Ken and I, especially mine, by the time you're done with 4, you could pretty much do whatever and they wouldn't. But no, Ken would do his own things, and he was real fun. Not always the best choices for him either. So
including for Ken and Vicki. So Ken was getting commissioned for the military, and wasn't Vicky protesting during the Vietnam War at the same
yeah,
time?
Fred, he was at MU, and you would go down on like game day, and he was part of the color guard. And at the same time, it was a Vietnam War, so the ROTC was really unpopular, and she was protesting at the same thing. So little different views there on all of it. During the draft, he did not, because he was already in the military, he never had to go to Vietnam. And Ken's number didn't come up ever. He was never drafted as well, but he went in, enlisted. So I think that's always been a bit of an issue, that he enlisted and Fred was an officer. And there's two different ways people think in that. I think that kind of guided both of their lives a bit. But yeah, it was just 4 unique individuals that, but yeah, Fred was certainly a golden child, and you could trust him. I mean, yes, of course he would be the one you would trust. Those other 3, not so much.
So then today, it's 2020. Looking ahead, where do you see, I guess, what's your guess on, what the world looks like in 2050 or later?
Gosh, I don't even know that I could fathom. If you think what I grew up, what's changed since I grew up, we had a black and white TV, no washer and dryer. We had nothing. You never had cell phones. Your phone was a party line with, you could pick it up and listen to other people's conversations in your neighborhood. Computers, it's just unbelievable, I think, from me as a kid to now. So I can't really fathom what from now in 30 years will be.
Mm-hmm. We'll turn to, I guess, after we talk to Brian, we can turn to that too and get into more of the social aspects. But I guess any other, things I missed or stories or thoughts that you'd want to share?
I don't think so. No,
okay.
I mean, I love being able to search on Google more than anything in the world, that it can answer anything I want to know. It's probably the best thing I think out of all this. So, and getting to Zoom.
Okay,
put it on.
Do you want to, what'd you say?
I think that's all.
Okay. Well, do you want to tag Dad in and we can talk to him and then switch back?
Okay.
Hello, Mark.
Hello. Can you slide a little to your right?
Over to the big chair.
Okay, so we've got, we just heard from Jan Fowler, so now we've got Brian Fowler, and we're going to ask us, basically just had a similar list of questions. So maybe to start off, could you reintroduce yourself and say when you were born and where you grew up?
Brian Fowler, 62 years old, November of 1957, grew up in the center of Kansas City, Missouri.
What was your address?
4106 Central, right off of Main Street.
And where did you go to school growing up?
Parochial school, Catholic grade school, Catholic high school.
What were the names?
Our Lady of Good Counsel, then Redemptorist, then Bishop Lillis.
And then for college, you went to?
Central Missouri State, and then UMKC Law School.
Cool. And can you introduce your parents? Their
Joe
names?
And Viola Fowler. Joe grew up 16th in Lister, which is basically the inner city of Kansas City. And Mom grew up in Maryville, Missouri, 100 miles north of Kansas City.
Cool. And can you talk a little about what they were like growing up? What did they do for work? What were their personalities like?
Dad grew up, he was born in 1923, so he was like 7 years to 10 years old during the Depression. And so, yeah, he had to work a lot when he was in high school. He always told me he didn't work after school. He worked before school and after school both. And strictly blue-collar family. Just grew up, they didn't have a lot, but they didn't know they didn't have a lot, so it didn't matter to them. That's how most of the people in that era grew up. My mom grew up in Maryville, Missouri. Her dad, my grandpa, worked at the monastery in Clyde. She actually grew up in Clyde, Missouri, which is outside Maryville. And he worked for the monastery on the farm for the monks and the nuns up in that area.
And what were your grandparents' names?
Geneva and Clarence Merrigan, and Samuel and Katie Fowler.
And for your mom's parents were in Maryville, or
Clyde, yep.
right outside, and then your dad's parents, where did they grow up?
Let's see. My grandma grew up, I think, in Kansas City area, and grandpa's family was from Ohio. I think for the most part, he grew up in Kansas City.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we talked about your parents and where or your grandparents, where they were from. You talked a little about what Joe and Vi's life was like growing up. What were their personalities like?
Joe, he had a sense of humor, but it took a while to get it out of him. He was pretty stoic and more just, quiet and kept to himself a lot. And mom was always either working, cooking, cleaning, so she didn't have much time. She was always running here or there, taking care of everything. Yeah.
And how about your siblings? Can you say who they are?
Mary Kay's the oldest. She lives in Connecticut. Then Sharon lives in Kansas City. Bree lives in Kansas City. And my brother Don lives in Lee Summit, right by Kansas City.
And you had one other brother who passed away.
Don had a twin who passed away when he was 3 months old.
And what was the cause of death for that?
They weren't sure. Back then they just called it sudden infant death.
Mm-hmm. And what was that like did your mom or dad talk about that much growing up?
Not a whole lot. Only on Memorial Day when we go to the grave. I know it, was an incredible, sad time for them. Yeah.
They had that, and then they had kind of a difficult family life
and
too.
A few months later, they learned Sharon had the diagnosis was cerebral palsy, but it affected her mental functioning, cognitive ability. So she's done pretty amazingly well considering how she started out in life.
Because she went to become not a nurse, but she went to work at the hospital.
She went to they called it Marillac. It was a grade school for kids that had special needs, and then she went to a high school for special needs, and then she worked in housekeeping at a hospital for 43 years.
And then how about the rest of your siblings? What do they do for work now?
Mary Kay's been in the restaurant business a lot, and then she's worked at Macy's. Bree's a nurse and teaches at Central Missouri College or University, and Don he's a retired policeman.
Cool. So I guess looking back, growing up, what are some memories you have on, what was your childhood like? And
just like
school?
Leave It to Beaver, I had friends that I ran around with all the time, mowed yards with, played sports with. Still friends with some of them today after almost 50 years.
And who are some of that?
Mark, Jimmy, Art, Tom, Mark, Jimmy, and Art, and Jeff, and Tim.
Cool. So did you have to work growing up?
Heck yes.
What were you doing?
Had my own lawn business when I was in high school, cleaned gutters, washed windows. Then I worked at a grocery store as a sacker. And we always stayed busy. In high school, you had to earn your own money if you wanted to spend it.
And how did you like school?
School was good. I was lucky. I always did well in school, got good grades, and for the most part came pretty easy for me. But I worked pretty hard at it.
How about looking at family traditions or other family memories? Are there either traditions or memories that jump out at you?
Thanksgiving, all the dad's side of the family would come over to go down to the Plaza Lights, and so we'd have 30 or 40 people at least at the house, and we'd all walk down and watch the lights. So that was one big tradition, and then always 4th of July picnics We always have that with the Fowler side of the family, and Christmas.
Mhm. And were there any, I guess, vacations or other experiences that kind of
Didn't
stick
take
with
much. We'd always try to go to the Lake of the Ozarks for a week in the summer and stay at the Star Motel.
you, but never went out on the lake, did you?
Never hardly ever went out on the lake. Just that cement pond. No, that's our vacation. And then we go to a lot of ball games too. I guess that was part of the vacation.
How about, so looking back, I guess either childhood or otherwise, what would you say is one of your best memories you have?
No, just friendships, staying in touch with people that you got to know and be friends with, and those friendships have lasted forever, probably.
And how about one of your worst memories?
No, boy, I don't know. I've been pretty lucky. Probably getting older and realizing that Sharon had issues, and always wishing she didn't have the issues she had to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see. You went to school, went to Central Missouri, and then what led you to law school? And can you talk about what you do now?
A teacher at Warrensburg's, I was going to be a police officer like Don, and she said, well, "Why don't you take the law school exam?" I hadn't even thought about it, and I did. So then went ahead and went to law school, and been practicing 38 years now.
So you graduated from CMSG or Central Missouri, went to UMKC.
Yep.
And then what led you to your current firm, Evans and Dixon?
Went to work at the Court of Appeals, and then that judge there hooked me up with a litigation firm where I started doing some work comp, and then Evans and Dixon came to Kansas City and hired me to open up their office in Kansas City. So I've been doing that for almost 31 years.
So then you started working, when you're in Kansas City. And can you talk a little about how, from your perspective, how you and Mom met too?
Yeah, through Vicky. I knew Vicky, and then met Jan a couple times, and she was supposed to meet me at a bar one night. She went to the wrong bar. I gave her a second chance, and then things went well from there.
And then you were going to propose one night, but something came up.
She'd had too many adult beverages.
What's the story there?
She wouldn't have remembered what I had my tuxedo on.
Because you were going to
Columbus banquet. She'd been out with girlfriends earlier that afternoon, and she was overserved.
So it was at the Knights of Columbus when you were getting inducted, and you were going to propose there?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
So then you ended up asking her later on?
So I postponed it till we were getting ready to go up to Bethany to see her mom, and I asked her before we went up there so we could tell her mom.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then what are some things that you remember from the wedding as well?
It was Saturday morning. It was raining and storming like crazy. Yeah, and then we ran out of food, and I had to buy more food at the reception because everybody was eating all my food.
Mm-hmm. I think right.
Yeah. Then I took your mom to the Burger King drive-thru after our reception, get us something to eat because we hadn't eaten.
Because you guys, neither of you ate anything?
Nope, too busy dancing and talking. Mm-hmm.
So then, let's see. So then you guys started a family after that.
Yep.
And you've been working since then and are getting ready to retire in the next few years.
Yeah, hopefully a couple of years I'll be done. Yep.
And what are you hoping to do in retirement?
A lot of volunteer stuff, I hope. Church stuff, hospital stuff, just stay active, volunteering, and maybe take up the game of golf.
There you go. What else? Let's see. Can you tell us about, I guess, someone in your life that you'll always remember or that had a big influence on you?
Yeah, obviously my dad, mom, siblings. Yeah. Probably Jimmy and Mark, two of my closest friends.
Mm-hmm. What would you say you feel most grateful for in life?
Family, friends, and faith. Yeah, I'd say the 3 F's, for sure.
And on the faith question, so your family was, or is, I guess, Catholic and very religious. Can you
Right.
talk about, I guess, that aspect of growing up?
Yeah, your grandmother, she prayed every day, and she wasn't forceful about it, but wanted us kids to follow that too, to be sure we kept the faith. And Dad too, he would never miss Sunday church.
But your dad was not Catholic growing up, but converted
He was
when you met
Methodist
your
and
mom.
converted, yep, after he met Mom. But he was very, very devout too.
Let's see what else. What would you say are some important life lessons you've learned along the way here?
You're more important than anybody else. Mhm.
And how would you say your life's been different than you imagined?
Not really different. I wouldn't think so. Kind of about what if I went back in time, if you told me I'd have 3 kids and Sophie and Jack now. I said, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty cool life.
Is there anything you would have changed looking back?
I don't think so. No. No, I don't think so.
How about, maybe to close it up too, can you talk about, I guess, personalities of your siblings and how you all interacted?
A little feisty at times, probably a safe way to put it. Strong personalities, but we all seem to have crossed those bridges and get along pretty well now.
What set each of the siblings apart?
Well, Sharon, is the nicest, and Mary Kay the goofiest, and Rose the enforcer, and me and Don just kind of stand on the sidelines.
Cool. And what have I missed? Is there any other, I guess, memories or thoughts that you'd want to share?
No, how happy I was when Leah got married and Mark got married.
Mm-hmm. Probably a little more happy during one of them.
Yes, because one was more expensive than the other.
Uh-huh.
But we won't go into names.
Well, there's, actually one other one too. So looking at health, the health side of things, can you talk about what led to both of your parents to pass away, and I guess any other health issues that are
They were
common on
lucky,
your
yeah,
side?
they both made it to, Dad was 88. He had fought cancer since he's about 62 or 63. He had like 2 or 3 different types of cancer, but he fought through till the end.
What kind did he have?
He had prostate cancer, bone cancer, and ultimately colon cancer.
And he died from colon cancer?
Basically, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Mom, she had emphysema, a couple strokes towards the end. That's probably what she died from, was strokes.
And how about in the rest of your family? Are there other common health issues that pop up?
Well, cancer on Fowler's side of the family, and Reed, of course, has cancer. That's
Breast cancer.
breast cancer. Yep. Yeah, that's been the big one on the Fowler side, is cancer's taken 4 or 5 people.
And you haven't had any, but you've had pre-cancerous stuff.
Skin stuff, yeah.
Skin stuff. And then didn't you have a pre or a polyp for, what is that, colon cancer?
Yeah, but that didn't show anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so pretty lucky so far for me.
Cool. What else? Oh, and then I guess maybe to wrap up too. So can you talk about some of your hobbies too and what you do outside of work?
Yeah, I like sports of all kinds, like to work out, run till my knee starts aching. Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
I just always like sports and being active.
And then you are still volunteering with the church?
Nursing home communion, but with the pandemic, hadn't done that for a while.
But that's something you've done for 20 years?
Yeah, since you were a little guy.
So taking communion to the nursing homes and chatting with folks there.
Yep.
Great. Well, those are my main ones. So
Good.
maybe with that, let's bring Jan back in, and then we can talk about some of the other social type questions.
Hang on. I told him.
Okay. So now we've got both parents back. So we've talked about, I guess, each of your personal lives. And so this segment is more geared towards kind of what was happening in your lives outside of your immediate family from a society perspective. So I guess maybe looking back at your life, what would you say are some of the most significant events, whether that's political, cultural, technology, that stand out as kind of, these were the most important moments in our life?
Probably technology.
Yeah.
And from what I started out in law practice to what it is now, just 180 degrees different.
In what way would you say?
With the computer access, everything's online. People don't call you anymore. They just email you all the time. Just completely different way things can be done now.
In a positive or negative way?
Both.
Mhm.
Both. I miss the personal contact with people, wanting to talk more versus now just email. Yeah, you miss a personal connection.
And Mom, how about you?
Yeah,
Technology?
technology. Yeah, everything. I mean, a cell phone. I mean, you've come a long way since a rotary phone with 15 people on the line to now. But yeah, there's just, I mean, everything just has accelerated. Which
Do you
I think,
remember, for both of you, do you remember the first time you used a computer?
Yeah, probably when I got married.
the biggest thing was Dad at work he got a mobile phone that literally was in the size of a small suitcase, and you could barely hold it, and it was about...
This is Harold or Brian?
Brian.
Yeah.
And it was like this thick, so you look like you were in the military with a field phone. And we thought that was so cool. So that was like 1987, 86 that he had that. Mm-hmm. And now you've gone to cell phones that are your whole life. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was still expensive. So yeah, computer probably when we got married.
Mm-hmm. Was the first time you used one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they did have like Fortran, and they had the huge ones at college, but I didn't take IT classes, so that didn't really involve you then.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned the first time you flew on a plane was in college?
I went to a dental hygiene meeting in Dallas, yeah, and I had never flown. It was really expensive. You know, when I was growing up, and that was just so far out of our wheelhouse that you just wouldn't have done it. So yeah, that was the first time. It was the best thing ever. I still love it. But that, and you used to be able to smoke on airplanes, and now the thought of that, being in a closed plane with smoke flying around, just kills me.
And Dad, how about you?
22 or 23 years old.
To fly to?
New Mexico.
For what?
Went skiing with Greg and John and Ronnie Panis.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let's see. So when you guys were first born, you were both, 1956 and 1957.
Correct.
So Kennedy was either president or I forget when he was elected. Sometime right around then. Do you remember any of the Kennedy era, or I guess the assassination?
He was 61, assassinated.
He died in 63. I do remember. Yeah, I do remember, because we would have been in like kindergarten, first, second grade, somewhere in there, and it was a huge deal. But you do remember him because it just seemed like a more glamorous. I mean, from my age, they just seemed like, what a cool couple. As far as the presidency, I knew nothing at that time about him, but yeah, I definitely remember being in grade school when he was killed.
And do you remember your parents' reactions or teachers' reactions?
I don't remember. And I'm sure, I mean, it would have really gotten my mom, but I don't remember it all.
Did she ever talk about it too later?
Just maybe a reference to it, but no. They were just very hardy then. You didn't dwell on things.
No.
You just...
They had enough negative stuff already. They lived through it.
I mean, they really are the generation. I mean, they just didn't, that wasn't something they would have done.
Mm-hmm.
You deal with it, and tomorrow it's over and move on.
And Dad, so your mom mentioned her parents were kind of split ideologically as far as politics go. Your mom was very Democrat leaning, and was your dad too?
Yeah, yeah.
So do you remember her talking about Kennedy much?
Not much, no. No, other than it was sad, but no, not really. Mm-mm.
And then, so let's see, we had Kennedy, and then obviously Johnson after that. Johnson brought the Civil Rights Act, and Martin Luther King, kind of spanning throughout that era. What do you guys remember about, I guess maybe first kind of just racial issues in general growing up, and then also, what do you remember about Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement?
I grew up in Bethany, and they had one Black man that was, he always seemed to me like he was old. So I heard of Martin Luther King, and you would see him on TV, but racially, I was honestly pretty clueless about anything other than waspy type people until I went to college, and my first roommate was a Black female from St. Louis.
So what was that like?
It was great. She was so fun, but it's just, you don't realize how much of a vacuum you lived in until you got outside. And it's like, whoa, there's a whole world. So, the civil rights, you knew about it, but for me personally, I didn't see it because I wasn't around it. But
So I assume that means you probably never saw any segregated buildings or,
No.
things of that nature.
No, truly, he was the only Black man ever. And you still wonder what made him settle in Bethany as the only Black man ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed, obviously, since I've been gone, but I'm not sure how much.
And how about in Kansas City?
I remember Martin Luther King. They sent us home from school when he got assassinated.
And what was that like? That
Scary.
day, I guess.
Scary.
How so?
Kansas City ended
Kansas
up
City had some riots. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
down on by the plaza
Yeah,
tennis
not too
courts,
far, and to the east. Yeah. Yeah. It was scary.
and you had Black kids in your classes.
Not so much a good counsel when I got to Lillis, obviously we did.
Because Lillis was very desegregated.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It was also on the east side of the city where
Yeah. East
it
side
had
of
a big
Truce.
dividing line. Truce
Yeah.
would have been the dividing line,
Right.
and
Mhm.
still is a
Still
bit.
is.
Yeah.
In the city, yeah.
And do you remember seeing, I guess, outside of the kind of clear-cut housing segregation in Kansas City, do you remember seeing other issues pop up from, I guess, a racial tension standpoint?
Oh, some, yeah, some. But obviously, the housing was the most. Inner city was, at that time, exclusively African American, and the west side was Hispanic, and
Everything else was white.
everything else was white, yeah.
Mhm.
Kind of lived in the pocket where I Hispanics to the west of me, and over to the east would be African Americans.
And so then civil rights, well, and actually, so you mentioned there was riots around on MLK Day. So what did you do? You went straight home? And
Yeah, they sent us home. I just don't remember how long, if school was out, they kept us out a couple days or what, until things calmed down. Kansas City had some, but not near as much as some other cities did.
do you remember seeing anything memorable, I guess, that day?
I think there was more than what you were probably aware
Probably
of.
so. Probably more than what I was aware of, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you can read about it now, and it's like it's so hard to imagine that in Kansas City. But I think there was a bigger march than you think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah.
But we were young for that too. So
Because you would have been how old?
7. I would have been 10 or 11.
Yeah.
so your world's pretty small.
Hmm. And then I guess another big thing would have, when you guys were growing up, was the Vietnam War. And Mom, you talked a little about Ken and Fred both being in the military, and Vicky kind of being in the anti-Vietnam protests.
Yeah. But
Cool.
Fred was so gung-ho military, but that said, he still didn't want to go to Vietnam.
Mhm.
He wouldn't have had a choice. And then you just remember when they would draw the numbers, and you would know people, that they were so close but didn't go. I mean, from that age, I didn't really honestly know very many people at all that I would know very well that went.
Mhm.
But you're picking from how many people in Bethany each year, 30
Mhm.
in the surrounding areas. I mean, in that age pool, but no, I know it was a big deal, but yeah, I was still young too for that.
And Fred had wanted, I remember him saying he wanted to, well, he became an Army Ranger after ROTC, and his thinking was, I want to be, if I have to go, I want to be as well trained as I can
Yeah.
to be prepared.
Yeah. And he was finance. So probably thinking I would have a better life than some people maybe there, but he still wasn't interested in going to that.
Mhm.
And fortunately didn't have to.
And Dad, how about your family and the people you knew?
Well, the dad and my uncles were all served. George, my cousin George was in the Navy. Can't remember if he served in Vietnam. He may have been outside. And the only one I can remember, my grade school track coach got drafted and he died in Vietnam.
And died there?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But you and Don registered, but didn't have your numbers
Don
called.
did. My age group, we didn't even have to register.
Really?
You didn't?
Mm-mm. No.
For selective service?
No, they stopped it when I was 18.
And I guess, what do you remember about towards the end of the war when people were coming home? Do you have many memories of, like, I guess, the tension as
just
the war was
protests.
wrapping up?
Protests and bring people home, and then the scene of the last ones leaving the embassy and all the South Vietnamese people trying to get into the embassy so we take them with them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I just know in retrospect that they did get the short end of a stick. They served, but they didn't get what they deserved when they came home, and with no choice of their own.
Mm-hmm. And then, I guess, fast forwarding a little bit of time, I guess it wasn't that far off, but what do you remember about the moon landing? And I guess the run up to that?
I was at the Hub Club in Bethany, sitting at the pool, and it was a big deal. And they had a TV there that day outside, which was huge. And that was a big deal. I mean, that's kind of one of the first, big deals I really remember.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Dad?
Sitting on the front porch at 41st and Central with a little portable TV that Dad had hooked into the outlet.
Yeah.
It was a big cheer afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
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 And I guess in the backdrop of that whole time would be all the Cold War buildup, too. What do you remember, I guess, about that aspect and, kind of the Soviet tensions?
Just not a whole lot. I mean, again, we were still fairly young and kind of isolated. I mean, I remember what was going on, but I don't remember doing any of the nuclear bomb, hey, get underneath your desk. I remember doing that more for tornadoes at school.
Civil, in case of nuclear, you did it.
Right.
Yeah. You would get under, but I'm with you. I mean, that was Gorbachev, right? Later.
That was Reagan and Gorbachev were at the tail end. So that would have been.
That's kind of more when I was aware of it,
Mm-hmm.
of the Cold War. I mean, Russians in my parents' generation, that was never a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of good came out of that when I was young and growing up.
Mm-hmm. And then, so we had, the Cold War kind of wrapping up. And then around 1990, 91 is when Brad would have come. And same day, another war started.
Yeah.
You talk about that?
Storm. They
Yeah.
were talking about it while I was in labor, and we could listen to it. And then when we brought him home, it was full on, had started, because Fred and Rhonda came over to say hi, and we watched the info, and it's like, wow, weird time. But yeah, so that was on his birth.
Yeah.
And that ended up being a relatively short endeavor. And then overall, pretty peaceful 90s. I guess what stands out to you about the 90s?
We had 3 little kids. You were just trying to survive, getting through, I don't know, world issues.
Not much going on in the world issues now.
Do you have any in the 90s? I can't even.
Clinton, I guess, and the Monica Lewinsky affair.
Yeah.
The growth of tech and kind of the tech boom.
Yeah. It didn't matter. I do remember on Clinton, I mean, and I'm well aware of that one, but my mom would still stand behind him if, oh my God, don't ever let anybody say anything bad about that. If he was a Dem, then it was fine. It was fine. So.
And then that took us to Bush v. Gore in 2000. So the new millennium plus a weird election plus soon to be 9/11. What jumps out at you from that period?
The end of the world for 22K. What was it?
Yeah,
Y2K.
Y2K. That was,
Y2K.
I mean, you thought about that forever, and then absolutely nothing happened. Politically, I feel like you kind of have, up until currently, I feel like there's just, the way it goes in waves, and the waves are all similar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the same kind of, you're dealing a lot with the same topics. And then until Obama was elected, so you get the first person of color, and that was a big divisive factor, I think. I thought he did for the most part, I think he did a good job. And then obviously with Trump, it's just, in my opinion, it's just spun out of control. It's just such a weird thing. And even if I agreed with his political bend, he's just such a narcissistic, rude person. I mean, you've always before thought of presidents as presidential, yeah. Gentleman, well-spoken, could help a country in crisis, and we are so far from that path right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just such a divisive situation we're in right now. It brings, you had black and white before, you had, Russian, all that, but this is just so divided within everybody
Mm-hmm.
So the best solution is you don't talk about politics when you go anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And Dad, any other thoughts from you?
Oh, that's right. That's how I've seen it. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
I told him he agrees. No.
Yep. Well, I think those are.
I told him you were late for the first date and you went to the wrong bar.
Mm-hmm.
He stood me up.
Well, those were, I think, all the questions I really had written. I guess any other general thoughts on things I missed or things you'd want future Fowler offspring to know?
I don't think.
The First Amendment is for the governed, not the governors.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What's that from?
Supreme Court case, Washington Post v. United States.
Oh, take that. Dear, I don't know. I might. It has kind of spurred your mind, and you're like, oh, maybe I'll write down some things. The closer mom gets to dying, it's like, oh, what you had suggested a long time ago. Oh, you should have asked her. Did you ever ask her? And no, I never did, because I was kind of like my parents. You just go along, and
Mm-hmm.
and now it's like, oh, but no, not really.
Okay.
I would like to do her 23andMe before she dies, but I think that ship might have sailed a little bit, because I'd love to see what her situation was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, I think that should wrap it up then. But
Thank
thank
you.
you both.
Thank you, Mark.
Yep. All right. Thanks.
63 it is.
Who did